Cameron Creations. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single thing. I am participating in the Altenew Educator Certification Program, and this is the Level 1 final. We have to create 2 sets of cards for his and hers, and I am doing encouragement cards. I was inspired by the Beyond Basic Backgrounds, Easy Ink Blending Techniques, and the Let It Shine classes. So for my first card, I will be using the Amazing You stamp set, and I'm creating a background using one of the stamps, and I'm using yellows and purples and golds for my card set. And I'll be using the same stamp set throughout all 4 cards. I'm just creating a random background out of a soft yellow color. If you're creating a background using a stamp, don't forget to stamp off of your page, and also don't forget to rotate your stamp. Now I'm also going to create one of the stamps, a flower with one of the stamps, and I'm going to ink up in purple and green, and then I'm going to use the coordinating dies to die cut that. I actually used a really light green the first time, and I stamped it and I didn't like it, so I went back in with olive and stamped it again over top of it and really liked the darker green a lot better. I think I used bamboo the first time and it just wasn't dark enough in correspondence with the purple that I used, so I just stamped right over top of it in olive and it was perfect. So we're going to use the coordinating dies here and die cut this out. I usually use washi tape to hold my dies in place. It just works a lot easier for me than using like a magnetic plate or hoping that it stays in place. To go along with this background, I want to add a little strip of patterned paper as well as a little bit of gold cardstock, gold glitter cardstock. So I'm trimming down a piece of patterned paper from one of the 6x6 paper packs and just a strip of gold cardstock as well. And they are roughly about 3/4 of an inch and 1/4 of an inch. And I'm going to have that over on the left hand side of my panel. So I did trim my stamped panel down just a little bit. All of the sentiments that I am using is from the Sohcahtoa Stamp Set, because those are all encouraging stamps, and pardon my head there, I just wanted to make sure that it was pretty much in the center. I'm stamping on black cardstock, and I'm going to white heat emboss this with a little bit of white embossing powder. I usually use a coffee filter to catch my embossing powder and then funnel that right back into my container. It works for me. Some people like to store their embossing powders in separate containers and use that container to spoon back over. I end up making a bigger mess that way, so I usually like to use the coffee filter. Now I'm going to trim that sentiment down in a strip, and then I'm going to attach my patterned paper directly down to my card front. And I'm using a 110-pound cardstock card base here, and smooth that liquid adhesive out just a little bit. And I'm going to adhere this right to the edge. This is a side folding note card. Make sure it's nice and straight. And it is a little bit longer than my note card. I'm going to trim that off in just a minute. We're going to butt this up against here. I'm going to use some foam tape and pop up this panel and just place some foam tape in different areas on my background. Just cut them off in little strips here. Ta-da! Pop that on real quick. And I usually keep several different widths of foam tape on hand just for different things. I have some that are different depths as well for different things. And I'm going to align this with the open edge of my card front here and pop that on. And then I'll use scissors to trim off the bottom of the panel. Ta-da! And now I'm going to pop on my flower as well as my sentiment and our little glitter strip here. Now, I know you're wondering, Jill, you didn't do any ink blending on this card. You're supposed to be inspired by ink blending. You didn't do any. I am, don't worry. So I wanted to see where I wanted to brighten up and really show off areas on the card. And I grabbed a Q-tip because I don't have any tiny little ink blending brushes. So I just grabbed a Q-tip because it's what I have on hand. And in the center of all of my flowers in the background, I took that same yellow color and I filled in the centers of my flowers in my background. Really, really quick, easy ink blending in my background to make those flowers really pop. I know it looks kind of weird because those flowers are so light, and that's because they have softened out because they've dried. And as this dries, it will soften out as well, and it is absolutely gorgeous in the background. And I'm going to do the same thing to the center of my purple flower. I'm not going to do the leaves though, because that just kind of looks a little weird. So I'm going to do that to the center of my purple flower as well. And there is my little ink blending for my flowers. Fill those in just a little bit and give that background a little bit more substance as well. Absolutely adorable. For our next card, we're going to be creating a heat embossed background using the Pattern Play Diamond Stamp Set. And I'm going to ink blend around the edges to create a highlighted center. And then we're going to create a flower cluster using the Amazing New Stamp Set. And then we're going to trim that background panel down just a little bit and pop that on the front of a card. When I'm using my Misty here to actually stamp big backgrounds like this, I will put my paper on top of the stamp like you just saw and flip it over. It's just easier that way for me. And then I'll use a rag to make sure I get good pressure or my sleeve if I have on long sleeves, and run that around the edge of my stamp and make sure that I get good even pressure all over everything, because I really wanted to make sure that this impressed all over my paper and made sure that I got a really good impression. I'm using some gold embossing powder here, and then we're going to heat that nice and smooth. If you have any areas in your heat embossing that don't exactly smooth out, it might need a little bit more time with the heat tool to make sure that it's nice and smooth. When I have a background panel like this, and of holding it in my fingers because I don't want to get burned, and I don't want to put it flat down on my mat because I don't want my mat to warp. So I'll pull out a cutting board and put it on my cutting board so that I can chase my paper around just a little bit. A wooden stick, little popsicle stick to hold this down would help too, but I just didn't grab one. Hold it down with my finger just for a second there, and just make sure that all of the spots are nice and melted on here, and get all the little areas. Make sure everything's all nice and shiny and pretty. There is our background there. Now I'm going to trim this down just a shade. I think I took 1/4 of an inch off the top and the bottom just so I could have a nice pretty border, or white border around the edges of our background panel there. And now I'm going to stamp and die cut. Oh, I'm going to ink blend first. Sorry, I forgot about that. I'm going to ink blend. I'm actually going to pick this up because I want it to be darker at the very edges. So for me, it's easier, instead of putting this flat down, it's easier for me to get a really good dark edge if I pick up my paper, because I can actually slide the tool off of the edge of the paper and get more ink on it. And then I can work my way in on a flat surface and get that softer blend towards the center of it. So now I can create that more of a halo effect on the center of it and get that softer blend that I'm looking for, so I can have that highlighted area in the middle of my card. Now I am creating a halo effect kind of in the middle of my card of that white area, but my element is actually going to be off to the side because that's more visually appealing to show off that more white area and have your element over more to the side there. Just something to think about when you're creating your card, of that visual appeal as you're working through. This was a lot of fun to create too. Just to think about how to put together this card set so that the 4 cards went together and coordinated, color coordinated, and the stamp sets went together, and it was very fun to create. So you see that I already have something die cut out over here. This is from the first card, so I'm just using the paper that I had before, and I'm going to stamp some flowers over here. And I'm just picking some different blooms off of the stamp set and inking them up in some of the purples. And all of the flowers are going to be in purples. Purple and yellow was actually what I decorated my very first place that I lived on my own. I decorated it in purple and yellow pansies. And purple is my favorite color, and purple and yellow as a color combination has kind of always stuck with me as one of my favorites. So, and I hadn't done a purple and yellow card in a long time, so I wanted to do some purple and yellow. Clean those stamps off just with a cloth really quick, and also get some greenery in here real quick. And then I'm going to use the coordinating dies to die cut those. So I'm gluing all of my elements flat down to my card base and to the front of the card, except for our sentiment strip, which we'll make here in just a second. And the sentiment strip is going to be popped up with just a shade of foam tape. I'm also going to use that little trick with the sticky kitchen wrap to place all of my elements and make sure that I get them where I want them in the grouping that I want them. It makes it a whole lot easier to make sure that I get glue on all of the elements and make sure that they're all in the right place and that I want them. I can align them on the front of my card, put them in the exact places that I want them, and flip the kitchen wrap over, put the glue on it, put it on the front of my card, and then gently peel everything back, and it's where I need it to be. For all of my sentiments, I am using black cardstock with white heat embossing on them. The black with the yellow and purple just pops for the sentiments for these cards and is absolutely perfect for them. And get that white heat embossing out of the way there, and I'm going to cut this sentiment strip down into a little rectangle and with my paper trimmer just chop that down. And sorry, that's a little bit off screen there. It's closer to me so I can see exactly where I needed to trim that down. When it comes to trimming things and cutting things, I'm very much a visual trimmer, and a lot of that comes from experience of just eyeing things. But there's definitely a lot of really good markings on most of the trimmers that are out there today that you can use that are absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to lay everything out, and here's a little trick that I use. Since we're working on with something with a card base already under it, sometimes your card base likes to pop up on you. I use a little piece of washi tape just to hold it down so it doesn't pop up on me. Just hold it down to your work surface and it'll set right there, and it doesn't move anymore. And that washi tape isn't going to tear your card front, especially if you detack it like you saw me sticking my fingers back and forth to it. It will hold it down just fine. So now I've gotten all of my elements exactly where I want them, and I'm going to take a little piece of kitchen, I'm just stopped and studied it to make sure that I liked it. Now I'm going to take my kitchen wrap here and I'm going to press it down, and I press down on all the areas where all of my elements are, and then I'm just going to gently pick it up and I'm going to flip it over, and then I'm going to put all of my glue down where I want it. And I'm going to put my foam tape down too on the back of my sentiment. Where the foam tape is on the back of my sentiment, I'm not going to press that down yet because I'm going to get it crooked. Every time I do this, I get it crooked. So I'm not going to press it down. It is going to be loosely there, but anytime I do this, I always get it a little crooked. So I know that, and I'm just going to let it loosely set there. And thankfully, this foam tape is forgiving enough that it's not going to stick immediately, and it will let me pick it up and move it around where I want to. So now all you have to do is pick it up just a little bit, and I pulled just a little too hard, but that's okay. Pick it up, stick it back under there, and everything's still exactly where I needed it to be. I just pulled a little too hard. I got a little excited. But that's the beauty of using that wrap right there. And now I can pull that tape off. I saw that it was a little crooked, and I can pick this up very gently. Ta-da! Knowing how to fix things as well as how to make things, because sometimes we forget that we do make mistakes and things do need to be fixed in our cards, and showing that it's sometimes really easy just to fix that. Just pull it up very gently and place it back down, and your card is finished. Ta-da! And there's pictures of the finished card. For our next card, we're going to be creating a very different background. I'm going to be using the Medallion A and B stencils. The first thing that we're going to do is actually strategically ink our background. I'm using a really light purple here, and I'm just ink blending in specific areas. I'm not doing the entire background, just in specific areas. Then I'm going to layer the other stencil on top of it, and I'm going to run that through my die cutting machine. I want the impression from the stencil first, and it's going to look like that it's a die instead of a stencil. You know how you can do the impressions from your dies? You can do that with a stencil as well in an embossing mat. You might, depending on your die cutting machine, you might need to use an additional piece of paper or an additional shim with it just to get enough pressure for it, but it will work beautifully. I'm just cleaning up the ink off of my mat there real quick. Now I'm going to layer my stencil on here, and I'm just aligning the pattern, and I'll put a piece of washi tape on the back on one end, make sure my pattern is aligned, and then put a piece on the bottom end. I'm going to run it through my die cutting machine, and then we're going to strategically ink blend in specific places again so that we can highlight some of the areas on our panel. Just a real quick back and forth. Super easy. Now take a look at this. This is so cool. I'm gonna ink blend first. I'm not gonna take it off. So we're gonna ink blend just in a couple of different areas. I'm just taking a little bit darker purple and ink blend in a couple of very strategic little areas here. And I'm ink blending basically in a circle where those flowers are in the stencil, and just ink blending in that circle, just a little bit darker ink. And I'm going to peel this off. You can see the texture in the back of that panel, but now look at that. You can see that on the front. It is so pretty. Now we're going to go ahead and finish this off. I'm just taking the leftover ink and doing that center to make it stand out just a little bit more. And I wanted the panel itself to completely shine, so I took some iridescent shimmer mist and spritzed the entire panel. So all of it's shimmery. It's not just in one place. All of it's shimmery. And we're going to dry that panel. I'm just taking my heat tool and drying that back down flat just for a second. And now we're going to finish off the rest of this card. I had already stamped and die cut a bloom and a stem and it's in green and yellow for the front of our card. Now I'm going to stamp our sentiment, and we're of course sticking with the encouragement, and I'm going to white heat emboss this on black cardstock. Pardon my big old head there in the way, just making sure that I get it down in the corner. And white embossing powder, a little bit of heat here to melt that embossing powder, get that taken care of, and then I'm going to trim that down into a little rectangle, and we'll pop that on the front of our card. So we're going to be creating a wreath out of our blooms and our leaves. So first I'm going to stamp and heat emboss our flowers and our leaves out of white embossing powder, and then I'm going to ink blend over top of those so I can get some various color and texture in those flowers and leaves. For the background, I'm using the diamond pattern play, and I'm using the extra stamps that are at the bottom first, and I'm going to randomly stamp the 3 diamonds in the background, and I'm going to heat emboss those in gold embossing powder, and then I'm going to fill some of those in with yellow ink, and then I'm going to stamp over top of it in a really light yellow ink. Apologies that my big old head is in the way here. I just wanted to make sure that my stamping was straight. When I started doing this, I wanted to make sure that my panel was straight, and I wanted to make sure that when I put my stamp down that it was straight. And what I'm doing is aligning the center dots that are on the stamp with the lines that are on my mat. I'm visually aligning those to make sure that they're pretty straight. Not perfect, but pretty straight. So I'm going to put gold embossing powder on all of my areas that I stamped. being careful not to put my fingers all over my panel so I don't have fingerprints and get embossing powder in places that it shouldn't be. And then I'm going to heat emboss this. And I'm also going to put a piece of vellum over top of this background panel so that my wreath on the top really stands out. And this is probably my favorite card. Out of all of them that I made, this is my favorite card. It's actually a little bit busier than most of the cards that I make, but this is my favorite card. I fell in love with this one when I got done with it. Now we're going to actually fill in some of these diamonds with the fill-in stamp with some yellow ink. And I'll have all the specific colors. I just don't have them listed in front of me right now. I'll have the specific colors listed over on my blog for the step-by-step directions for everything. And just fill this in really lines easy. Ta-da! We're going to fill all these areas in. And just looking straight through my clear block. Everything's all nice and filled in. And now I am going to actually flip my stamp over on flip it over on it so that the stamp side is up. And I'm going to put my paper on top of it so that I can get that all over pattern on my background as well. Absolutely gorgeous. I love that background. So I took 2 circle dies and I made a template for a wreath. I just cut it out so that I would have a circle. And now I'm going to take all of my little elements that I die cut previously and I'm going to put them on my wreath where I want them, and I'm going to arrange them. And I'm going to make sure that I have leaves pointing in different directions, that they're not just all pointing in one direction. And I'm not filling in the entire wreath. It's only going to be about 3/4 of the way filled in, and that way I have a place that I can overhang my sentiment. I'm also going to be putting in my piece of vellum behind this so that my wreath really stands out from the background. And I absolutely love, love, love this card. It is gorgeous. So I'll have pictures of the finished card at the end here. And yes, I'm using my kitchen wrap technique again so that I have all of the placement of everything. Instead of gluing the flowers, I'm gluing the circle die itself because that's a whole lot easier, and I can put it all down here and make sure that everything is attached. And I'm going to flip this over. I should have let this set for a few minutes, but I was kind of in a rush. So but this also gave me the opportunity to see where I had things stacked on top of each other and it needed to be glued down. Ta-da! Now I can go in and actually add my leaves behind everything very simply. And I can rotate my wreath however I want to on the front of my panel. I did cut my piece of vellum a little bit smaller than the card front itself. It shows about 1/4 of an inch of, it's about 1/4 of an inch smaller all the way around. I'm going to place that in the middle there. And now I can glue behind my leaves and around that bottom there, and no adhesive is going to show. And now that's in the center. And now I'm going to add my sentiment, and of course it's going to be on black cardstock and white heat embossed. And that's going to finish off this card. Next, we're going to take a look at how I packaged these cards, which is a little bit different. The most difficult part of this entire challenge for me was the packaging for the card set. Because I don't keep a whole lot of materials that I can use to do recycling with, I had some backer board from like 12 by 12 paper packs, and I went and dug around. You can laugh at this because it's actually hysterically funny. I went and dug around in my gift wrapping supplies, and that twine that you see up there in the top right corner is from packaging from Christmas, from stuff that my mother gift wraps. My mom likes to put bows and wrap everything so that you have to have a chainsaw to get in it. So what I ended up doing was creating 2 panel backgrounds, and I did this for both the guys cards and the girls cards. So both of these are in here. And I created a 6x6 background board that has patterned paper that coordinates with the cards themselves. And I am a kind of a twiney, farmhousey kind of decorative person in my home. So I was like, you know what? That's what I'm kind of going to go with here. Something pretty simple. I put the envelopes in the back on the backer board itself and stacked them up to where you can't see them because they're just going to be plain white. And then I layered the cards. These are the guys cards, but I do the girls cards here in just a second. And like I said, this video for the packaging is attached to the guys cards too. I'm going to wrap this twine around here and create basically a little cage for my cards. And it's a flat pack. And I really liked this idea of it being a flat pack because it kept the cards nice and snug. I could add a gift tag to this, and I could actually set this on under a Christmas tree if I wanted to, just as it was. Or I could put this in a gift box. I could put this in a little bit larger envelope and padded envelope and mail it, and it wouldn't be super bulky. I could actually add this to a gift bag if I wanted to, and everything would still be there. And I really liked this idea of this flat pack with this super simple bow on it, and that way I could decorate it however I wanted to, or add to it or take away from it, and everything was still nice, snug, and secure. And I did that with both of these sets of cards, and I still got to use recycled materials from my leftover chipboard that I have from backer boards from 6x6 paper packs, and the leftover twine. I have to giggle at that. I wrapped it all up and I keep it every year. I never have to buy ribbons and twines and stuff because I always just pull it off the packages that mom leaves, you know, that mom has for Christmas and birthdays and stuff, and I just wrap it back up and around a spool. And I haven't bought ribbon and stuff in years because I just reuse what mom puts on a gift. Seriously, I've done it for years and years and years. And there's that one. So the girls' cards are done the same way, and I literally just fanned out where I wrapped it around a couple different times and made sure that it wasn't crossed over in weird places, and I created that flat pack for it so you could finish it off however you wanted to. And it has this really cool crisscross patterns on the front and the back of the cards, and I fell in love with this, and I could stick it however I wanted to in a box or bag or an envelope. And all the finished cards are here, so you can take a look at all the individual finished cards as well. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to check out the guys cards, and that will be linked down below, as well as all of the supplies that were used. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss a single video. Have a great day.